Morning, everyone. Thank you for closing out this beautiful week here with us. My name is Stacy Duncan. I get the pleasure to serve as the head of the Leadership Alliance. I serve as the president and CEO of the Greater Binghamton Chamber of Commerce and the executive director of the agency, which is the Broome County IDA and LDC, and informally called the Leadership Alliance. Today is a great program for you all. Today is the first of a deep dive into energy development in our community with a focus today on battery technology and the current ecosystem. It is no doubt that energy development now and in the future is critical to our economic and business and community development. And what we'd like to do with these programs is take a deeper dive, bring industry experts in to talk about these topics so that when opportunities come our way, we have a broad-based community understanding of what those opportunities bring to our communities. Today, as I mentioned, is focused on battery technology, but we'll also be doing a deep dive into alternative energy sources such as biofuels, geothermal technologies. We'll be taking a look at the world of entrepreneurship in energy development with our partners from Binghamton University and the 76 West program later in the year. And then talk a lot about public policy and workforce development as it relates to energy. So I'm very excited to bring to you today's program. Battery technology, while it seems is taken the world by storm in many ways, has actually been a technology that we've been using for decades. And as we see the increased use in our electronic devices and everyday sources, we are also seeing the change and the paradigm shift into the increased use of battery technology for electronic mobility and for energy storage. So we have a great panel today to talk about the battery technology current ecosystem. I think you'll be surprised of how many household names here in our community, like Raymond Corp, BAE Systems, and other companies here have already adopted and been really early innovators in battery technology. And we'll also hear from a very exciting group with the Imperium 3 Consortium, which was an exciting project that started with Nobel Prize winner, Dr. M. Stanley Whittingham, and we've gotten to see this energy development, this company develop truly from the R&D stage to commercialization. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Brendan O'Brien, and I have to first thank Brendan O'Brien, our Community Development Specialist for the agency, and Kyle Davis, Public Policy Government Relations and Public Policy Manager for the Greater Binghamton Chamber. I'm putting a great panel together today, thanks to you. So Brendan's going to do some quick bios of our speakers and we will jump in. We are recording today's program, so it will be available to view following this event, and we will be posting that. Please feel free to put questions in the chat and we will make sure to leave time for a dialogue following today's presentations. So with that, Brendan, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Stacy. And I'd like to thank Kyle as well for helping out and putting collaborative effort here to put this panel together, and also our speakers for today for agreeing and participating and putting stuff together to present to our community. Kyle and I are working hard on our next series. If you want to put it on your radar, it's going to be in June, the first Friday in June. And it's going to be on alternative sources of energy. So we're looking at wind, biofuel, geothermal, a couple other topics that we're going to be talking about in June. So that'll be the next part in the series. But for today, we have a good group of speakers. We're going to start off with Matt Fronk from Raymond Corporation. We also have Bill Aker from New York Best, and then Paul Stratton from Imperium 3. And so we'll be starting with Matt. Matt spent 32 years at General Motors and was responsible during the last 20 years of his career there in starting and leading their PEM fuel cell development program. The result of this was the build of 100 prototype Chevy Equinox FC vehicles. He spent a year at RIT at the Sustainability Institute and has been consulting in the alternative energy field for more than 10 years. He was a founding member of New York Best and a current board member. And he is also supporting the Raymond Corporation in their lithium-ion battery commercialization efforts. So with that, Matt, I'll hand the docket over to you and take it away.
Thank you, Brendan, for the nice introduction. And what I wanted to talk about today here was really lithium-ion batteries impact on our life, not just personally, but in your community, and then also with universities and just in general, because things have certainly changed over the last 50 years, and we'll do a little bit of history and talk a little bit about how they're made, and Bill and Paul will fill in the rest of the details from there. So next slide. I think Stacy mentioned you have a Nobel Prize winner in your midst down in the Southern Tier. Stan Whitting, I'm a good friend of Bill and mine, and it's always something that I use when I go to a party. Does anybody know a Nobel Prize winner? Because I certainly do. And Stan is a great guy to teach young students about energy storage, particularly about lithium-ion batteries, and using your local university to connect with businesses, I think is really key. We have some really great attributes in New York State to take advantage of. So how we put all those together with all the regions and the universities and companies, I think is really important. And what Stacy's laying out here is I think is really, really good. So next slide, please. This slide shows the technology developments over time with batteries. And we'll all remember lead acid batteries, and those are in your cars today to start those. And you'll remember some time ago, nickel cadmium batteries came out, and those provided power for small devices, electronic devices. Then you had nickel metal hydride, lithium-ion batteries, and in the future, these lithium metal batteries, which are projected to be very high energy. And in each of the cases here, as you see these bubbles on the chart, more energy has been able to be stored in a certain volume. So if you think of a AA penlight battery, that same battery could hold almost four times as much energy in the future as it did with a lead acid battery type. And the reason for the technology changes isn't that one of these technologies was bad and was superseded by others. It's just that technology developments occurred, and some take much longer to happen than others. And I think a good analogy, one of my old bosses and colleagues said to me one time was that the Stone Age didn't die for lack of stones. So battery technology is not going to die because of lack of technology. You'll see that it progresses over time, and this is a great chart to show the potential for the future and what we can do. And you can see that in some of the future slides that I have here as well. So next slide, please. This is a continuum over the last 50 years or so, and we'll remember when the first battery-powered watches came out, and that was pretty novel back in the late 60s. And then the first cell phones, I had one like that, and you could recharge it, plug it in. Then you had your laptops with the removable battery pack in the back, and those look like AA batteries. Those started to go to lithium-ion as well. Then your smartphone. Each of these products had different requirements and different technologies. And even our smartphones today require more and more power than the first ones. So how do you package all of that? And that's really what the technology driving has been to accomplish that. And then we get to cars and automobiles, and the amount of energy required for that. And then of course, energy storage on the grid. And that's a big one, I think, for New York State. Bill's been involved with a lot of that. He'll talk about that as well. But over time, you can see that the size or the amount of energy required from a watch to say an electric vehicle is huge. So if you didn't change the technology, you wouldn't be able to package that much energy in those bigger applications. Next slide, please. I wanted to show just some pictures of how these batteries are made, and I think Paul will tell a little bit more about what's going on in his area as well. But if we think about how these lithium-ion batteries are made, think of the Reynolds wrap in your kitchen drawer and how thin that is and how difficult it is sometimes to cut and sometimes how it wrinkles. Well, in those cases, that's kind of the backbone of lithium-ion batteries. And you can see this woman here cutting some of the electrodes. So those are 3 electrodes. Those could be made into strips of 3 batteries. And each company has their special sauce or special chemistry to put on those foils, which they really are foils, and then how they're processed and how they're heated and dried. And then also even how the materials are mixed and put together and what solvents they use. So this has been a big development over time. China has done a lot of development work on making many millions of batteries. And so when you hear the term gigafactory, like what Tesla is building, you can imagine how many batteries have to be made and how many of these sheets of electrodes have to be processed every minute to be able to do that. So this just shows you some of the new machinery that's been developed and some of the processes, et cetera. So this is the building block of lithium-ion batteries in general, and then the adjustment of materials for each follows from there. Next slide, please. When you have those electrodes that we just showed in the last picture and you start to put a number of those together, this is what the pouch, this is a example of that, and this is a pouch cell, and they come in all different kind of formats. Round ones like you're used to buying in the store. These pouch cells would be used in, say, an automobile application, and you can see around the edges there looks like a crimp. So those electrodes go in there, anode and cathode. We won't talk too much about the technology piece, and then have to be put together kind of like in series or parallel to get the voltage and the current that you require. And these pouch cells can be used in anything from your cell phone. So if you look at the size of the phone in your hand or in your back pocket, and then compare also to something that might be used in a car, which might be the size of a sheet of notebook paper, just for some perspective. Next slide, please. So then we take those cells and we build them into modules or building blocks. And these then can be assembled into larger battery packs. So again, as we talked earlier about the applications moving from very small things to cars and grid support, these are kind of the building blocks of what you need. And lithium-ion batteries do require some electronic communication to make sure they're healthy, make sure they're charged properly, etc. So these module developments and the integration of those cells is very important, and how you put these together, and then also how they're evaluated from a UL perspective or from an overall performance perspective. And so this is an exciting part, and as again you can see, these are going down an assembly line. So batteries are made at high volume today, and how we take advantage of that in Southern Tier and New York State is really important as the business grows in the United States. Next slide, please. Now we take those modules and we integrate them into a pack. And this is an automotive pack, but you can see the typical large battery systems will have all of these items. Some will have some type of thermal control. It could be liquid cooling, could be air cooling. You'll have a high voltage interface. You have to integrate the packs appropriately in a skeleton or some type of fixture so that they'll be fine with shock and vibration if it's an automobile, or if it's an environmental situation where you have to cool it for, say, an outdoor application. So a lot of work goes into this, as you can imagine, from a safety perspective. If it's used in a car where I came from, you know, they have to go through crashes and make sure that if people are involved in an accident, firemen know how to take care of it. So it is different than gasoline engines, but also remember that you have a tank of combustible fuel under the back of your car. And in this case, you just have energy stored in a different way. So there's lots of work that's been done on all sides to make sure these are safe in all applications. Next slide, please. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about electric vehicles and some of the applications, because that's really the interesting part of how we use energy storage for the future. And so if we think about electric vehicles, how do they work? Some of these vehicles have large batteries, 30 to 100 kilowatt hours. In the early days, say with the Nissan Leaf, you might remember people would get 60 miles range out of it, and they had something called range anxiety. So they were fearful of how far they could go from home before they had to charge. Some of these new vehicles have 300 to 400 mile range. They can charge very quickly on fast chargers. You can charge them at home. Even when you slow down, some of the braking energy can go into recharging the battery as well. There's really minimal upkeep. You don't have to grease a battery or put a new air filter on a battery, or typically change the coolant. So as long as you keep it charged in the right manner and let the vehicle take care of the vehicle in the rest of the way with your tires and brakes, you're in really good shape. So it does have a minimal impact on maintenance. It does have, of course, impact on cold weather, because you might need to use the heater or windshield wipers and things of that nature. But these vehicles are all becoming real and starting to make impacts on not just the United States, but all over the world. And each car company has their versions of electric vehicle. There's some really neat ones coming out. I think Tesla was really the first one to really start pushing this, but I just saw the ad for the new Mustang electric vehicle and the new Hummer electric vehicle and the Porsche. So all the car companies are making announcements about how they are moving to electrification. So how we figure out and how we get involved in this kind of business is really critical. As we said, New York State and especially the Southern Tier has lots of capabilities to tap into for the future here. So it's best that we get going now. Next. This is what a factory might look like. Actually, this is not the factory. This is the test facility at General Motors, where I used to work. They have a 80,000 square foot test facility to look at environmental impacts and different driving ranges or driving loads and things of that nature. So you can see the amount of infrastructure that has to be developed. And this occurs not only on automobiles, but for grid support and for every other battery kind of thing that you might look at. New York BESS, which Bill and I are part of, have a test lab up in the Rochester area as well. So how you test and then how you get these kind of batteries certified under UL is really important. SAE also has certain requirements for transportation, and we'll see more and more of these things in the future. Next line. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Raymond, because Brendan announced I've been supporting the Raymond folks in Green, New York for a couple of years now, and just in November they launched a new product, and it's called their Energy Essentials product line, and it is lithium-ion batteries. Previously, Raymond forklift trucks and all forklift trucks were powered by lead acid batteries, and you can imagine in a heavy duty application, let's say Amazon, which ran 3 shifts a day. With lead acid batteries, they'd have to have 3 batteries, 1 battery in the vehicle, 1 battery charging for 8 hours, and 1 battery cooling down for 8 hours. With the lithium-ion battery, with that technology, you can have 1 battery and do what they call opportunity charging. So when the operator comes in for a break or lunch or at the end of shift, there's enough capability to charge quickly to keep those batteries charged for the next section of the shift. And so why is that important? I only have to buy 1 battery. They cost a bit more, but I only have to have 1 battery. I don't have to pull them out. I don't have a big room with lead acid batteries and chargers. So this is really exciting for Raymond. It's really starting to take off. There's growth in Green, New York from not only from the business side, but also from the employment side, and bringing new folks in that understand these technologies. And that's the connection I like to make between places like Binghamton University and the companies here. So we're really excited at Raymond of launching this, and have a number of other new products in the pipeline that will fill in the whole product mix for them. So stay tuned for more. Next slide, please. So what's next for what we do with energy storage? On the top, you can see these are the things you're pretty well familiar with. And look at the size differences from hearing aid batteries. My dad's got those, and I've replaced a couple for them, and they're pretty tiny, to your watch batteries. Then your cell phone. You remember the laptop one where you could pick out, and then your fork truck and automobiles. And then where do we go tomorrow? Really looking at wind power. So what happens when wind is not blowing and you're still part of the grid? You have to have some kind of energy storage. Then you also have your grid support as well. And then through the manufacturing piece, we have plants being built up, and I think Paul is going to talk to us a little bit about that. And then also the recycling piece. So it's how do you take the materials out of the ground, build your batteries from manufacturing, apply them in various applications, and then make sure that you get the right materials back out of it, and we don't waste those and put those back into landfills and things of that nature. So there's a whole ecosystem being developed across our country and across the world, and it's really our time to take advantage of that. Next slide, please. So just a quick case study of things to think about. In the Rochester area, which is where I'm from, a number of old companies and other things have been repurposed to take advantage or to get into the new business. And on the infrastructure side, Eastman Business Park, which is part of Kodak, repurposing some of the capabilities there. As you can imagine, making camera film looks a lot similar to what I showed you in the electrode making. So they have capability then to make battery electrodes, and they are doing that today for several companies, and also making electrodes for fuel cells. So that's a really critical piece. Also, there's a recycling company located up there taking advantage of some of the other infrastructures at Kodak. We can see that life cycle up there. And then on the people side, And this is, I think, important for all of New York State. We have some great universities and academic capabilities and generating students. So how do we make sure we keep the students in their areas? On the people side, Plug Power has made some announcements about building their Gigafactory in Rochester, New York. So we're quite excited about that. They're also building their hydrogen generating plant in the Stamp facility out near Batavia. And then on our academic side in Rochester, we have the RIT Battery Prototyping Center. So for the Southern Tier, you can do the same kind of things. And I think all of that is all in process. And that's why Stacy and Brendan are having this conversation today, is to see what how do we connect more dots in the future, not only in your region, but also across the state, because there's a lot of things we can do to compete with the rest of the states here. Next slide. So thanks for listening here, and Bill and Paul will fill in the rest of the details on some of this and where the state is going and how we will actually make batteries down in the Binghamton area. So it's a pretty exciting time. So thanks very much.
All right, thank you, Matt. And I would just like to make the announcement that we'll be taking questions at the end. So if you have any questions that come along, that come up and you want them to be answered, feel free to write them right into the chat and we will address them at the end after our last presentation. So with that being said, our next presenter is Dr. William Aker from New York Best. He is well-known and highly regarded scientist, business leader, and entrepreneur in the field of energy. He currently serves as the first executive director of New York Best, the New York Battery and Energy Storage Technology Consortium. Under his leadership, New York Best has grown its membership to more than 180 companies, created the Best Test and Commercialization Center and new battery prototyping capabilities, and has performed pioneering work in advancing markets, policy, technology, and product development. Dr. Aker is an active and influential voice for energy storage industry in New York State's groundbreaking Reforming the Energy Vision Initiative, and he is leading the industry's participation in the state's Energy Storage Roadmap Initiative. Dr. Aker has more than 25-year career in energy, includes management and leadership roles with OptiWind, MTI, and MTI Microfuel Cells, Plug Power, and Texaco. He serves on the advisory board of the Center for Future Energy Systems at RPI and the RIT Battery Prototyping Center and the Southern Tier Clean Energy Incubator. He received a PhD in Applied Physics and Engineering from Yale University and a BS in Physics from Rensselaer Polytechnic University. And I know you said don't read off the whole thing, but I couldn't find a good breaking point in there, so I thought I would just do the whole thing. So and the floor is yours, Bill.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate the introduction, and I very much appreciate you folks putting on, Stacey and Brendan and Ryan putting on this event. I think events like these are very important because there's a lot of discussion of energy storage going on in the world right now. It's valuable to have good information and also to hear from people that are involved. And so the framing that Matt just gave you, hearing from the people building a factory from Paul, I think is important for the community to understand. If you can go to the next slide. New York Best is a nonprofit industry organization advancing the energy storage industry. And this was formed in 2010. Matt was one of the original people behind this, along with Stan Whittingham that Matt just mentioned at SUNY Binghamton, Mike Field, who's CEO of Raymond Corporation, and a number of other people, including people from BAE, that recognized the fact that energy storage was going to be a pivotal industry going forward. The growth over the next 10 years really have proven that out. Our organization has grown during that time. We now have, it says here, approximately 170, I'd say probably about 180 companies and universities involved in the organization, ranging from literally two-person startups to some of the largest corporations in the world. Our goal is to advance the industry and make sure that energy storage is effectively used and we realize the benefits. If you can move to the next slide. Our mission for New York Best is to catalyze and grow the energy storage industry, as I said, and also to make New York State a global leader in energy storage. And New York State is really, truly in a position to be that, to be a global leader in energy storage. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about here. And so we do this by accelerating the widespread deployment of energy storage. Matt talked a little bit about some of the markets for storage. Obviously, as you go into those markets, there are challenges with opening those markets for these new technologies. The grid storage market, there's lots with the market rules, with how things are valued, how things are paid for. With the transportation market, there are a lot of considerations in opening those markets. I would like to make one comment, though, about a perception that some people have that these types of solutions, for instance, electric vehicles, are environmentally driven. And I don't want to imply at all that they aren't environmentally beneficial in a very, very large way. But, when Matt was just talking about electric vehicles, and he was talking about some of the benefits, I have an electric vehicle that's about 2.5 years old. The only thing I've done to that vehicle in that 2.5 years is put air in the tires and windshield washer fluid in the tank. And I have no need to do other things right now to that vehicle. Furthermore, that vehicle outperforms my Mustang convertible with a big V8 engine in it that I had previously. It is a stellar vehicle to drive. You put somebody in that vehicle, they will never want to go to a non-electric vehicle. So it is not purely an environmental that we're compromising for environmental reasons. These markets are happening because the products are superior, at least in many cases. So it's important that we don't somehow box these into an environmental vision of the world, and that we're somehow compromising in doing that in our thinking, because that downplays the scale of the opportunity. The scale of the opportunity is immense, and we'll be talking about that going forward here. The other part of our work at New York Best is advancing innovation and commercialization. We do that with the Commercialization Center. I'll talk a little bit about, with our work with startup companies, with our work with universities, through a number of events that we run, and et cetera. We also work, a third point here, to strengthen and leverage New York's world-class resources to grow the state's energy storage ecosystem and sector. And we have a number of those resources that we'll also be talking about here. So if I can move to the next slide. I will dwell on this, Matt already mentioned, Stan, but I do want to, these are words from the Nobel Prize Committee, that you can't overstate how much change has happened in the past 30 years because of the invention of the lithium-ion battery. How much the world has changed from what we're doing, carrying all these electronics, to what we can do with electric vehicles, with the grid, et cetera. So moving to the next slide. The industry, at least on the grid side and the electric vehicle side, is really at its very beginning. But it's already, just for the batteries, is already about a $40 billion market annually. And this graph is from Bloomberg New Energy Research. Bloomberg New Energy Finance is actually the name of the group, that is showing the projected growth in lithium-ion battery demand over the 2020s. And so you can see that it's going from a little over 200 gigawatt hours a year in 2020 to just over 2,000 gigawatt hours a year by 2030. That's a 10x increase in the demand for lithium-ion batteries in that decade. So think about any industry that you're aware of that already is a multi-billion-dollar industry that's going to grow by a factor of 10 in the next decade. This is a huge opportunity. And this is only the cells, the batteries. This is not the related opportunity of all of the devices that utilize those batteries, like what Raymond Corp is doing, and BAE, et cetera. Moving to the next slide. So of course, that's going to mean an incredible growth in manufacturing capacity. This is showing projections, similar projections. This is from a different firm, Wood Mackenzie. And it's showing the projection from 2019 in manufacturing capacity going from 238 gigawatt hours to over 1,800 by 2030. The important part of this graph, though, are the colors bars. And that is that the dark blue is the Asia Pacific, so dominated by China, but to some extent Japan and South Korea. You can see that that's the lion's share of these projections of the cell manufacturing. You can see the lighter blue bar is Europe. And you'll notice that Europe is growing rapidly in this projection, growing from a very small sliver in 2019 to actually about a fifth of the bar by 2030. The gray bar here is Americas, the United States, predominantly. That is showing a very, very minor growth going on. And that's extremely concerning. If you think about what we need to do to be able to be competitive in the world, having abandoned a strategic industry would be very bad. And we're going to talk about the fact that this is now being recognized and there are major initiatives to address this occurring. So moving to the next slide. In New York State, there is, of course, a very big push from climate reasons for addressing the greenhouse gas issues on the planet. And a little over a year ago, the state passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. That has a couple of very important legally required goals for the state. One is that by 2030, 70% of our electricity on the electricity grid, which must come from renewable resources. And by 2040, it's 100% carbon free. That is a very challenging goal. There are good reasons to do that, both for environmental reasons and economic reasons in the long run. Obviously, getting power from things that don't consume fuel is the cheapest source of power. So wind and solar are now actually fundamentally less expensive than fossil fuel power plants to produce electricity. The challenge, of course, though, is they produce it when they want to produce it, not when you want them to produce it. And that's where energy storage comes in. You really need to have some means to balance the grid if you're going to have vast amounts of renewable energy. And fortunately, energy storage can do that, and that's starting to happen. And then, of course, there's a greenhouse gas direct goal, 85% by 2050, which drives a lot of the transportation pieces and a number of the other sectors in the economy. And really, the vision here from achieving those goals are to clean the electricity industry and then use electricity as much as possible to power all other industries. The storage sector particularly, there are goals around in New York State around the grid needs I just spoke about. That's going to grow dramatically over the next little while. The state has initiated substantial programs to deploy storage on the electricity grid. That's resulted in numerous projects going in. And the state is working very hard with us to correct the market rules. And in a number of cases, we need incentives around the grid, primarily because the market rules are in a very strange way not fully valuing the benefits. So by addressing the market rules, we can actually open these industries as well. The electrification of transportation, Matt already spoke a little bit about, so I won't dwell on that further. But I do want to put a focus on this last bullet, 30,000 job goal by 2030. Governor Cuomo announced that goal for the energy storage industry here in the state. That is backed by a study that both New York Best commissioned and a separate study that NYSERDA commissioned to look at the opportunities here in the state. And both of those studies showed that it was reasonable to get to about 30,000 jobs in the next 10 years by 2030 in this sector directly. So it's something that we're very excited about. If I can move forward to the next slide. Now, I mentioned the concern of where the energy storage industry is growing in the world and the fact that New York State is very well positioned to be a leader in this space. And I think we've foreshadowed the fact that energy storage is a fundamental technology to two of the largest global industries, transportation and electricity. We will not be able to really utilize renewable energy to its full benefit or deploy it at the scales that we want to deploy it without energy storage. And because renewable energy is fundamentally cheaper, that's going to be a driver that's going to drive energy storage on the electricity grid. As we already showed, energy storage, both batteries for electric vehicles and the electrification of all other vehicles, potentially with fuel cells and along with batteries, are key to the future of the transportation industry. And we talked a little bit about all of the cars coming from these car companies, but the car companies have actually also made announcements that have indicated that they're moving completely away from internal combustion engines over a certain period of time. So they've committed to this sector, and they're putting their money where their mouth is. We're seeing major investments in the sector. Volkswagen placed a $14 billion order with Northvolt Battery Company. There's GM is committed, is doing a $2.5 billion, roughly speaking, facility in Ohio to produce their new batteries, along with LG Chem. There are a number of other facilities going in. So this is a key technology in those areas. It's also a key technology for many, many other industries. Portable electronics we're all familiar with, but defense, there's a joke in the Army that you can tell where the Army went by the trail of disposed batteries. Going to rechargeable batteries and new batteries and advanced batteries solves that problem, but it also means that fundamentally, they are reliant on that technology. It's a strategic technology for them. Material handling, we talked about Raymond a little bit. This is a key industry for energy storage. Aviation, medical devices, becoming very important in those industries as well. So right now, 2020, China has 93 gigafactories, US 4. President Biden commented on this just a little over a month ago. His quote was, "If we don't get moving, they're going to eat our lunch." And with that, announced a domestic supply chain initiative to study this and potentially to take action. The DOE has done an effort called the Energy Storage Grand Challenge, and this is a quote from their roadmap. It's a vital component for our national energy and national security. So this is an area that Washington is focusing on in an immense way over the next little while. If you can go to the next slide, please. So here in New York State, we have a number of commercialization resources that have been put in place. We have the Best Test and Commercialization Center operated by D&V that's up in Rochester that Matt mentioned. We have the Battery Prototyping Center that prototypes batteries. We have the Kodak Pilot Manufacturing Facility for energy storage components. We have many incubators in the state that are advancing startup companies in the space. The New York Best has our incubator program, the Bridge program. The Southern Tier Clean Energy Incubator in Binghamton has a number of battery companies and energy storage companies as part of it. And of course, as Stacy mentioned, starting out that C4V, grew out of Binghamton University that you'll be hearing from Paul next. Workforce development is vital to growing this sector. And we have a vast number of universities working on that and NYSERDA programs helping companies to develop the workforce that's needed in the space. So I can move to the next slide. So I'll just spend a moment in wrapping up to talk a little bit about the ecosystem and the capabilities we have in the state. We have some of the world's leading energy storage research in New York State. We have nearly 20 university research centers and institutes that have a significant focus on energy storage, with, as I said, some of the best research going on in the world. And a number of those are in the Southern Tier area. Certainly very prominent among those are SUNY Binghamton and Cornell, and many others in the state. Brookhaven National Lab is the leader in this space. We also have a vast number of company efforts, both from large and small. So you have the companies in the Southern Tier like BAE, Raymond, Corning, that all have significant work. We have dozens, though, of small startup companies, many in the Southern Tier, that are moving forward in the space. And we've put in place, as we already talked about, some of the testing and development facilities, but I actually just hit a smattering of them. There are many more in the electronics sector, inverter testing, power electronics. And you have to remember that this is a whole sector, and the development of products that utilize energy storage requires a whole array of technologies beyond the battery cell itself. And the good news is New York State is well positioned in many of those from a technology perspective, and in some cases from a manufacturing perspective. So let me move to the next slide. So in the case of manufacturing and supply chain, we have nearly 20 cell pack and system manufacturers around the state, more of them in the pack and system, but we do have a number of cell manufacturers, and you're going to hear from one of the prominent ones coming up next. This forms a key nucleus in order to have a concentration of industry in our area. The supply chain becomes very important to energy storage. If you look at how far a lithium atom travels to make a battery, today in general, it travels more than one time around the world. It leaves South America, goes over to Japan and South Korea, down to China, back over to the United States, and 2 different spots, and then shows up in a product. Simplifying that supply chain, making that supply chain more domestic, both for security and cost reasons, is very important. Recycling is also very, very important. We are fortunate to have attracted a leading recycling company in Rochester, Li-Cycle, that's starting operations there. Will be one of the most advanced lithium-ion and leading lithium-ion recycler in the United States. And there are a number of other potentials there in that industry as well. And just to conclude, I've got 2 more slides, I believe. You can go to the next slide. Commercialization efforts. We have many developers in the state that are active for deployment of energy storage on the electricity grid, 40 developers in that space. We have many people involved in the deployment of the transportation, but then a number of other products that we've talked about, and also major significant services around that. Because as I said, when you grow an industry of this scale, you're going to need a lot of support services, which is where many of your companies and people you represent or involved with may come into this. New York State has significant markets for energy storage, both in the grid side and in the transportation side, which should drive the ability to co-locate with domestic manufacturing. So we were pushing hard to see that happen and to see those markets act as a catalyst for the growth of the whole ecosystem. So with that, if I can move to the last slide, I'll wrap up. If you want to learn more about energy storage, New York Best website has a lot of valuable information. That's ny-best.org. We also have a conference coming up. That's a virtual conference. Hopefully our last one that we'll be doing virtually and moving to live again in the fall. Our virtual conference is June 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. Which would be a good opportunity to learn more. And I should mention our fall conference because it is in Binghamton, New York this year. So in October, we will be having an energy storage innovation and technology conference in Binghamton that will be discussing the growth of these technologies. Also, information for people that want to learn more. The DOE is a valuable site of information. The DOE Storage Grand Challenge has a lot of information. The website is here. It's just, if you just Google DOE Energy Storage Grand Challenge, it's probably the easiest way to get to it. With that, I'll wrap up and let you hear from Paul and the wonderful work that Imperium 3 is doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. Great presentation. Quite eye-opening for what we're seeing in the state. So now we're going to pivot back towards industry specific and talk about one that's starting up new in our backyard. And we're going to be talking with Paul Stratton. Paul is the Senior Vice President in Marketing and Sales at Imperium 3, responsible for growing the business globally with products built here in Endicott, New York for design in and use in electric vehicles of all sorts, energy storage systems, and all other categories where lithium-ion batteries will help build a greener and cleaner planet. Paul's career highlights include 20 years at Duracell, where he is a vice president of global marketing and product planning for the new products and technology group, and spent 4 years as vice president of advanced business development within the Gillette business unit. Paul was a member of the Duracell Corporate Operating Committee and a key contributor to the global efforts in both the worldwide consumer markets and technology OEM markets. More recently, Paul was co-founder and partner KMP Growth One, a consultancy focused on driving opportunity discovery and assessment for strategic growth-oriented innovation investments. So with that, Paul, take it away.
Sorry, I almost forgot to unmute myself, a common problem, but thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me along today. This is great. Two great presentations ahead of me and lots of good information. Today, what I'd like to do is give you an update on where we are and a little bit of an overview of where we're going. I'm sure lots of people have heard of Imperium 3 over the last few years. We are operating at this instant under the name of IM3NY. I think it gives a little bit of push on IM3, which was a short form of Imperium 3. And we like to talk about New York because that's where some of our roots are, and that's where we're planning on continuing to build the business. If you could go to the next slide, please. Always happy to see when someone else is using the same charts as me. So thank you very much for that. And it does point to the consistency in the way we view the market. But as has been pointed out quite routinely here, lithium-ion batteries are really a recognized cornerstone to achieving global clean energy goals. The market is growing exponentially, 34% per year through 2030. And I don't even want to venture to say what it looks like after that, because there's continued growth potential in many different areas. Clearly dominated, as has been spoken before, by electric vehicles, commercial and residential energy storage coming on very fast. But there's many more activities and many more devices and market categories that will benefit from lithium-ion batteries. One small point in here that I think is really interesting to think about. Everyone talks about a gigafactory, and a gigafactory just sounds big. You know, giga is one of those words that a lot of us grew up thinking and knowing was bigger than a mega and a lot bigger than a milli, but giga's a lot. Putting it in perspective, 1 gigawatt, a 1 gigawatt factory is enough batteries to supply roughly 15,000 cars. The number can go up and down, as we talked about. The number of kilowatts that go in a car can vary between 30 and 100, but that's a pretty good number, pretty good average number to use. So if you go back to what Mary Barra said just a little while ago, and for those of you who don't know who she is, she's CEO of General Motors. She came back and said that half of their vehicles for the North American market would be EV, fully EV by 2030. That's 1.45 million cars. That's a lot of cars. That's a lot of gigafactories. And you know, we hope that we're able to help in the supply of the batteries for many of the markets that are growing, just like GM's aspirations in the category. Can you go to the next slide, please? Imperium 3 recognized that there were lots of things going on in this category, and it was a large and growing opportunity that really was recognized locally by our company about 12 years ago, and maybe even a little further back than that. And what we really have here is the quintessential story of a development of lithium ion to where we are today, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But 12 years ago, Dr. Shailesh Upreti, with support from a lot of local entities, developed a company called C4V. C4V is a lithium-ion focused R&D company focused on advancing lithium-ion battery technology, but with a little bit of a emphasis, or more than a little bit, but a lot of emphasis on creating a greener planet and trying to build batteries that are not only more technologically advanced, but also greener than most, and all if possible. In order for C4V to realize their technology, Shailesh recognized very early on that we needed to develop some manufacturing capabilities also. And hence, IM3NY was born as the manufacturing arm to C4V. And we have a great relationship, a licensing relationship that's exclusive with C4V. Fundraising for IM3 began back in 2017. It was a very well taken on venture by Shailesh at the time. He's worked very hard in order to move that forward through time, and we'll talk about the success of that in just a moment. There was a broad spectrum of support in this area. First of all, we've talked about Stanley Whittingham, so I'm not going to go in more to him, but he's been a big part of encouragement and expertise in helping evolve us. There are many, and I apologize if I've missed anyone in this list of groups and entities that have helped us along the way. I'm the new guy in town, so I can take a little bit of an excuse on that if I missed anyone. But certainly I'm well aware of the broad network of companies and organizations that have helped us. And that's echoed by the community at large. Since I've been here, I've had reach out from many people in the community with broad support, enthusiasm, encouragement, all the things that a startup company like us need in order to push forward. So thank you all for that. And we really look forward to moving forward with your support and help as we go forward. Next slide, please. So where are we now? Well, we are building the next lithium-ion gigafactory right here in Endicott. I'm proud to be able to tell you that since Shailesh began raising funds for this, we have now, as of April of 2021, we have completed our funding with the ability to completely build out our first gigawatt of production here in Endicott. In fact, we've done a lot of things in support of that over the last couple of months. We have recruited and filled all of our key management positions with battery industry experts. We have people coming in who have deep roots in batteries. I'm sitting right now in our HQ, which we've opened up and begun to populate. We will be populating that much greater as we move along, but we have our administration, our operations, our sales and marketing, and our HR. We'll be moving into here, 130 Clark Street in Endicott, almost directly across from where the plant will be, but very happy to announce that we're doing that. And it's a great space. If any of you have the opportunity, please come by and visit. We'd love to show you around and introduce ourselves to you. We've begun demolition of the interior infrastructure at what was the old IBM plant, Building 48, for those of you who know the structure over there. There was a lot of things that had to be removed, big racking system. If you drive by, you will see a large cutout in the wall, and you'll be able to see that many of the very large racking systems in that building have been removed. I think there's still a little bit to come out, but a great step forward in preparing that building for the eventual installation and commissioning of equipment. So we have detailed engineering plans for equipment installation and commissioning have been completed. We're well along the way to be able to do that. Once the building has been prepared, we will be moving equipment from a storage facility in the IBM here on campus into the building and beginning to commission it and get it up to speed. We've been selling. It's a long process to sell in this category, as I'm sure everyone knows. It's a qualification, but we have about 6 signed contracts right now. And I'm also very proud to tell you that we are in very good discussion, detailed discussions with several very large customers across the US. Culminated this week with some very exciting progress with one of them. I can't tell you who they are yet, but it's exciting to say the least. And yeah, I think the other thing that's really important to understand is, as you go through this industry, and it was pointed out earlier, it's not just about today, it's about what's going to happen in the future. And what do we have that we can support evolving device categories, evolving markets? What do we have in store and in our plans and thoughts to be able to recognize the need inside those markets? I'm going to talk about that just a little bit at the end, but maybe we can go to the next slide. So just to be clear, what our mission is, it's a real commitment to the future. What we really want to do is lead technical innovation and development. We want to enable a greener and cleaner planet, and we want that planet to be sustainable for future generations. Very specifically, we want to lead in both battery design and production processing. We want to advance lithium ion, and we want to lead the standards towards performance and environmental impact. You know, when Shailesh first talked to me, when I first met Shailesh and started listening to some of the things he was saying, these were core things that were in his goals and in his movement through the category. And it's what really attracted people like myself and several of the others here. We are all wed to cleaner, greener planet. We're all wed to the evolution of technology in a positive way that makes this environment a little better for us all. When we have employees come in, we talk to them about this. This is ingrained in everyone. This is what we do, and this is how we want to do it. Can you go to the next chart, please? So I'm not going to put too much emphasis on these next couple of charts, but hopefully a year from now, I'll be able to replace our diagrams with actual footage from the plant. But in the interim, we see IM3NY as really the technology hub for lithium-ion cell manufacturing, a technology hub. We've already done a lot of work. We're working on new electrodes, moving from 2D to 3D. We're looking at new ways of preparing our slurry. We're looking at new ways of coding. We're integrating AI and ML, machine learning and artificial intelligence into our processes. We're really looking at how we can enhance the overall process to make a better lithium-ion battery. We will generate the least amount of scrap from our factory compared to other cell manufacturers. We also have the greenest battery in the world. Life cycle carbon footprint is 80% lower than competition, and we have that certified through NYSERDA at this instant. What 80% means is that if the rest of the world is at 100, we're at 20. That is a phenomenal gain in terms of our carbon footprint versus a lot of the other guys. Our commitment to clean and green is there. Next slide, please. I'm sure a lot of people on the call or on this presentation today are familiar with the process, but there's really kind of 8 things that go into building a battery. First of all, there's the mixing process where we mix components together, raw materials, to come up with a slurry. That slurry is coated, as was demonstrated early, onto a very thin electrode, and it forms both the anode and the cathode, different chemicals for each, of course. We go into what we call a blanking and welding process. That blanking and welding process was very nicely demonstrated in Matt's presentation this morning when he showed us what the slitting machine was doing and then how they cut and tab those to put them into a cell. We go into cell assembly. Cell assembly adds the separator to the anode and the cathode. And then once that is placed inside the can, we go through some electrolyte, we add some electrolyte to the can. It goes through a kind of a resting period. That resting period allows the battery to sort of form, called the formation period, of course. And then it goes into aging, where it's allowed to do some things and come into a voltage profile that's appropriate for shipping and maneuvering. So as we look at this, we've taken this process apart fairly well. And what we like to do is think that we've been able to advance some of the processes involved in this and creating really better quality product and a lower environmental impact. We're acutely aware that batteries can be an environmental issue. We have gone well above the requirements for any kind of air emissions legislated, and in our own opinion, bringing it into alignment with what we believe as a company. So we've gone well above. We've invested tremendous amounts of money to ensure that we will be at greater than 99% removal of anything in the air through our filtering systems. And that is, I think, kind of the best in the US that I'm aware of. Will be, I think, pretty much beyond some of the other manufacturers in that particular category, and about as clean and green as you can possibly get in a manufacturing environment. And we're very proud of that and happy to be involved in that. Can I have the next chart, please? So we get a lot of interest in where do our components come from, and we're very happy that we have 4 of the major components in our batteries are local to the United States sourced. Of those 4 components, the cathode, the anode, the electrolyte, and the separator, that's about 80% of the total cost in a battery. All of them are manufactured here in the USA, and the 2 main ones, the anode and the cathode, are manufactured right here in New York State. We have a partner company that uses C4V technology and produces the cathode and the anode material right here. Lots of interest in the fact that we're US based and our content is very high US oriented, and that's has resulted in us being qualified by a US government contractor of some note, and we're very happy about that. It's a particularly interesting qualification because it's in a high test, or a high, the word I'm looking for is an influential category with a lot of performance issues associated with it. So heat, water, humidity, cold, lots of different environmental aspects, and we've survived that. So that's a tremendous feather in our cap and a tremendous endorsement for our product. For those of you that don't know, there's really kind of 2 types of, well, there's 3 types of batteries that are produced. On the top one over on the right-hand side, that's a prismatic cell. A prismatic cell is kind of a secondary finishing element to a pouch cell, which is what Matt showed us earlier. Pouches can be built and put into prismatic canisters to produce a prismatic cell. It helps with the energy density, and it helps with other issues in formatting a battery for various applications. Many of the applications that exist in the marketplace, including a lot of the portable computers and things of the past, and a lot of the EVs today, incorporate cylindrical cells, and that's what you see a diagram of underneath the prismatic cell. And then, of course, the battery packs, which I think Matt, again, had a wonderful picture of what a pack looks like and how it comes together in a series parallel configuration. So can we go to the next chart? One of the things that we've done and tried to promote early on without being overly overt about it is just to demonstrate what our cell will do in relation to competitors in the marketplace. And if you look at this chart, and I hope that it's not too much of an eye chart for everyone, but it's, if I can just walk through it from left to right, we first took a look at cell safety. And IM3 uses a BM-LMP chemistry. BM stands for biomineralization, LMP is for lithium mixed metal phosphate. A lithium phosphorus or ferrite phosphate cell and an LMP cell are somewhat similar in their safety profile. When we add our biomineralization process to a cell, we enhance the overall safety and the management of heat inside of a cell. And that gives us a significant safety advantage over other types of cells. The NCA and the NCM cells require system management and cooling in order for them to achieve the same level. But on a raw cell basis, we are the highest rated safety chemistry known at this point in time. That also enhances our ability to deliver cycle life. Right now, we're saying about 4,500 plus cycles. That number could go up. As you know, we are a relatively new company, and testing on a cycle life basis takes time. So we have some pretty good test data to date. We have some pretty good algorithms, and we're comfortable saying 4,500 cycles. But I'm also going to tease everybody and say that could go up. Our watt hours per kg, our first cell is spec'd out at 190 watt hours per kg. That's a substantial increase over LFP and other LMP cells, about 20%. And NCA, NCM is clearly the category winner in that particular case. And just to put that in perspective, if they can drive 400 miles on an NCA, NCM cell, we can probably drive about 260 to 300 in that neighborhood. So they do have an advantage. Some of that advantage is we're given a little bit more advantage by our cycle life potential, but some of these cells out there are beginning to develop higher cycle lives also. But it's an interesting ratio to manage in design of batteries, but we think we have a very powerful case in favor of our cells in many of these different applications. And the last component of this is cost. Cost is of ultimate importance to many of the manufacturers out there. NCA, NCM, just by the nature of their components, has the highest cost. LFP is a little bit more than us, and we believe that at the end of the day, in mass production, that we'll actually have a cost savings or a very strong cost position within the marketplace. So that's kind of a really good summary of what we're proposing to be our case in the marketplace. There are lots of variations on this. There are lots of things to think about, but as a good core to our product, we think that these are winning attributes that will carry us into many different OEM or manufacturers and markets. I talked very briefly a minute ago about not just being a product of today, but showing and demonstrating something for the future. If you can go to the next chart, please. We have put in place a roadmap, and the roadmap is something that when we're dealing with a lot of the OEMs or a lot of the manufacturers, they want to know where you're going. They want to know where you're going to be in 3, 4, 5 years. And this is a summary chart that gives you some, at least a general glimpse into what we're thinking and what we've already demonstrated in several cases in the marketplace and in test environments. So our Gen 1 product is roughly 190 watt hours per kilogram. You go to our Gen 2, it moves up to about 250. Now we're starting in Gen 3 to start demonstrating solid state, where we go up to about 400 watt hours per kg. And that is a number that has been demonstrated in test environment by Shailesh and his group. and is something that we feel very excited about and confident that we're going to be able to get there within the next few years. And then the last tease is really out there kind of in a lithium sulfur cell. Lithium sulfur is kind of an evolutionary component of lithium ion development, but it has one great advantage in that it's very light. And when you think about applications that need weight control or need to have attention to lightweight batteries, I'm just going to sort of tease it out there and say aviation. A short distance takeoff and all those kinds of aircraft will be very interested in a cell like this, and I think they're already demonstrating some application of that in those particular categories. But I think it's important for our IM3NY to be able to have these conversations at a deeper level with some of the manufacturers, and certainly in some of the preliminary conversations that we've had. These kinds of numbers are exciting, and the fact that we have done some work behind them to support them and demonstrate that this can be done is also very important. So as we build out, can I go to the next slide, please? We are going to be building, and this actual diagram is a little older than I'd like it to be, but it was used in some previous presentations, and I wanted to have the continuity of it. So this demonstrates us going from about 1 gigawatt in 2022 all the way up to 30 gigawatts in 2028. We are actually extending this out a little bit, and now we're talking and beginning to plan for 32 gigawatts. And there's some technical reasons for that as we build out machinery and engineering process. But by 2028, we expect to be in the 28 gigawatt range. And what this is showing is a need for manpower for hiring that gets us into about the 1150 range. Without too much fanfare, I'm going to tell you right now, I think that number is a little understated. And I think it's understated from the standpoint that as we look at our manufacturing processes and build out, that this number might rise up a little bit. And it doesn't speak to what's the ancillary exercise around this. So we've talked a lot about what we build, which is cells, but there's also a need to take those cells and put them into packs, and take packs and put them into modules, and all of the periphery things that surround support for the industry of a fully integrated power source. What we haven't talked about in this either is the fact that some of our key suppliers will be looking to co-locate with us. So as we build out our gigafactory and continue to build it out, we'll have a need for sorry about that. We'll have a need for efficient control of the supply chain, efficient control of how we resource other things that will go into our batteries, and some of those companies that provide those services to us are already looking at what co-location opportunities exist, and that again is increased employment. Someone asked earlier, what kinds of things will we be looking for in the future? And it's a myriad. There's equipment technicians, there's quality technicians, there's engineers, maintenance people, finance and accounting, and human resources. It scans the gamut of what do you really need to make an industrial organization work. And that means that you've got to be able to make it, you got to be able to sell it, and you got to be able to count it. And you go to the business schools of the world and the engineering schools of the world, I think we touch on many aspects of what they're teaching now. And seeing support from the local universities and schools to help us build out our manpower through time is just absolutely fabulous. We like to hire at home, so to speak, and to the extent that we have available well-trained, skilled people to fill those roles, we are absolutely delighted to keep it here. In the next year, we will hire about 150 people in the area. That will take us out through our first Gigaline. I can tell you right now, we don't have 150 people hired at this instant, but there were people in the office writing job descriptions and looking for posting opportunities yesterday and the day before. So you'll start to see those jobs pop up on some of the environments and certainly on our website. But it's a little bit of a slow build as we go along, but we recognize the need for training of people. You can't just put them into a job and expect them to perform. So we will be hiring in advance of actual production and development of the business. Can you go to the next chart, please? So at the end of the day, what we're going to end up with is a battery that looks a lot like this. This is a rendering. From many of the things that I saw as little as 3 months ago, this is a manifestation of what all of those things are going to come together and produce. Our battery will be a prismatic cell. It is 150 millimeters long, 130 millimeters wide, and roughly 26 millimeters thick. It has application in a lot of markets. It is a fabulous fit inside of energy storage systems, both commercial and residential, but it also has great application in some of the electric vehicle markets and other evolving markets in the consumer field and whatnot. So last slide. We've kind of rallied the troops, and Stacy, you've probably seen this before, and it's kind of become our moniker, you know. We really believe that we have some advantages, and we call it the T3 advantage, and we talk to all of our potential hires and our people internally about it. We talk to our investors about it, and it really is a good summary of who we are and what we are. We have the T3 advantages. We believe we have the team in place in order to build this out and lead it. We believe that we've got technology both now and in the future evolving. And it doesn't take a lot to figure out that when you look at those growth markets for our product, that our timing is in a very good category. We are starting to be very loud and to be very proud. But it's up to us to make it happen, and we drive everybody in our organization by charging them with, hey, let's make this happen, guys. There's a lot here. We've got a lot of great tools. We've got a great community around us, very supportive, a lot of great organizations, and it's up to us to make it happen because all the pieces are there. So with that, you can go to the last chart. I think I still have it in there. Is there one more chart, or did I take it out? It's just it just
that
says,
one's on.
That's okay. I can talk to it. It just says thank you for being attentive and listening to us today. Thank you for all your support in the past, and I hope that we can count on your support as we move forward. It's just been a great journey to this point, and it's doing nothing but getting greater as we move through each and every day. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you to Matt and Bill. Excuse me, a little frog in my throat here. And before we have a few minutes left for question or dialogue, and I just want to emphasize something that was sort of threaded in all of the discussions today. And I'm thinking already it's probably its own separate and distinct panel discussion. Is what this brings to the table as well. This opportunity is just an incredible opportunity for talent attraction and recruitment. I know Paul and his team has already, from his corporate office, recruited some of the best and brightest from all parts of the country and I think throughout the world, and also providing that significant workforce development training opportunity for for residents within our region. And secondly, I just can't emphasize enough its beautiful marriage with the distinct makeup of the Southern Tier region from an advanced manufacturing point of view. I mean, it was about a decade ago when the Southern Tier Regional Economic Development Council outlined what are its key in core industry sectors and within advanced manufacturing, and specifically the transportation sector, which is just scattered throughout from as far as Hornell with Alstom all the way east of us into Shenango and Delaware counties. This is just the organic evolution of how we can support that existing base of large companies in the supply chain. So we're really excited to see this development happen. So with that, I'm not sure, Kyle or Brendan, if we have questions in the chat or any questions. If anybody has, feel free to unmute and ask.
Yeah, we do have a couple questions, and I think we'll go back and forth between Kyle and I with asking them. And I think, Paul, you kind of lucked out a little bit because you had Shailesh answering some questions for you in the chat as we went along. So I think he handled some of the difficult ones for you. But the first one,
Shailesh, if you can hear me.
I thanked him for you too. So first one we have is for Matt, and let me know if you can answer this or not. It's where is Raymond sourcing the batteries from, and are there plans to look at domestic sources going forward in the future?
Sure. There's actually an announcement if you Google that. Raymond Corporation has partnered with Electrovaya up in Mississauga, Ontario. So they're North American based. We're very proud of that, and they have an excellent cell chemistry and very durable pack for what's used and required in forklift industry.
Thank you. We do have another one. Kyle, you didn't take it?
Yeah, so IM3, what percentage of the gigawatt production has been taken up by the 6 sales contracts to date?
Oh, good question. It takes up a large percentage of it. Let me put it that way. Some of these accounts that we're dealing with are smaller, but they're high tech, specialized devices. So we anticipate that their needs will kind of go on a cyclical basis off of the first gigawatt. And what I mean by that is for us to integrate with these smaller customers who have a little bit of pent-up need because they can't get some of the volume that they want from some of the bigger suppliers out there. They have a need, they have a device, they have a market that they're trying to serve, and we have entered into contracts with them to help them serve that need. I anticipate that a lot of those companies will kind of go through a cycle. So we have some long-term contracts with some of them, but some of them will come in, take off early volume, but then their needs will disappear as they go on to different things. So we will be building, kind of think of it as 10 solid customers against the first gigaline. Each year, 2 come in, 2 go out, 2 come in, 2 go out. But as you think about that, our first gigawatt is really a demonstration. It's a demonstration of capability to be able to put a solid cell together, a safe cell to be able to manage what it takes to build a lithium-ion battery. And as we talk to some of our larger customers, they're very interested in following that path. They're very interested in seeing the results of what we do with some of these smaller OEMs and the devices that they serve. And that forms the foundation for data for some of these larger customers to look at us and say, gee, I am very interested in developing a relationship with you. I'm very interested in that relationship being based on not smaller quantities, but on giga quantities. I can tell you right now that I've already talked to a couple of manufacturers out there, and what they say isn't, can I have some of your 1 gigawatt volume? What they say is, how many gigawatts can you build for me for our own purposes, our sole purposes? And how fast can you do it? And then it becomes a very interesting conversation. So yes, the 6 is going to take up a large percentage of that volume. Think of it as being a little bit cyclical against different manufacturers, with some of them coming in and coming out. And think of it very largely as a demonstration and a creation of data that will support a lot of these larger OEMs who we're already in conversations with.
Thanks, Paul. Next question I have is kind of for anyone to answer. And Paul, you answered it a little bit for IM3NY, but just for the industry in general, it's what do you guys foresee as the workforce needs for the industry in the future? And what might need to be changed with the education and workforce system in order to meet those needs?
Yeah.
And I'll take a crack at that first. And I think if we look at all the research that's been done in New York State and the support from NYSERDA, all of that is excellent. I think the things that Paul's talking about relative to manufacturing is really critical. So the skills required at universities and 2-year schools to support manufacturing and engineering design versus R&D is really important. You certainly need R&D to continue the technology development, but you also need folks that can make stuff. And I think that could be really good classes and curriculum in some of our universities to support that. Many of our schools in the state have that capability, and just making sure we develop the right programs for that.
If I could just add to that for 1 second, if I can. When you look at a company like ours, and I came out of a big company in the Gillette environment, and Gillette got bought by P&G, and Duracell was a component of that. And you look at the percentage of money spent on R&D versus what's spent in a lot of different categories. And if you think about it as kind of like 8 to 10%, 8 to 10% of a billion-dollar company is a lot of money. Multi-billion-dollar company, it grows even faster. So we're looking for innovation to come out of R&D. Obviously, innovation is what's going to drive the future. I can quote Al Zane, who was the CEO of Gillette at one point in time, and he used to always brag that 80% of the products we sell, we didn't sell 5 years ago. And that speaks to the innovation cycle and the necessity of having R&D to support what you're doing for the future. You got to lead the duck, so to speak. You can't take a product today and try and shoot it at a device that's going to be developed in 5 years. You need to be leading it with your technology also. So there is a high component of, yes, we need manufacturing expertise. We need the best engineers. We need the best people manning the production side of it, but we also need a very heavy component of R&D. We need to be driving this industry, not just as a company IM3, but as a nation. We need to be catching up to where other countries are in the world. The way we're going to do that is with innovation, R&D, and excellence in manufacturing.
If I could add that, what Paul's describing is really kind of the key potential advantage of both New York State and the nation of having those R&D capabilities and the thought leadership and the technical capability behind that. Expanding that and growing that is critically important. Our community colleges, to what Matt was talking about, are going to play a very important role in the manufacturing technician and manufacturing workforce support, and also in the deployment of technology. So we have to strengthen our community colleges programs. New York Best has worked with a few of the community colleges in the state, and that's an area that we'll be putting much more effort into, and the state will be putting much more effort into going forward. I know we're getting very near time, but I noticed there was one other point. People talked about Jigger Shaw and the DOE loan program. Jigger just recently said that they have about $18 billion available right now in that program. So the outreach there is important. New York Best has worked directly with companies to also leverage New York State resources in putting new facilities in the state. So a number of the companies we talked about today, we've helped to have it happen. So we'd encourage you, if you're looking at expansion, to talk with us and to reach out to Jigger and the state.
So we do have other questions in the chat. One is from Mike Gillespie. Can you talk about the plans for next generation of batteries using solid state electrolytes? How far out is this?
You want me to take that?
Whichever one of you thinks you can answer it.
Well, it's a really good question, because solid state is really the holy grail of where everyone is aiming at. And if you followed QuantumScape, for instance, they've announced plans in conjunction with a lot of different groups out there, including Bill Gates, which is a nice name to tie to your company and investment profile. But even in their in the smaller components of a smaller type in their announcements, they do recognize that there's lots of challenges to be overcome, and they've done some nice demonstrations. There's no doubt about it. But you know, it's a challenge. If it was easy, we'd all be doing it today, and it would have been launched 10 years ago. So there's lots of things that need to be proven out. We believe that we've got some good IP and will become patented position inside of that through C4V and Shalesh's efforts. We think, actually, in my own personal opinion, it's outstanding. I was really thrilled when I first saw what he was doing. So that's probably 4 or 5 years out before we can legitimately say that we're going to be able to operationalize that. Hopefully we can have samples well in advance of that, but there are critical things that need to be solved on the pathway there. You can't just read the headlines and accept it that it's coming. You have to do the work, because it's a challenge.
So we have 2 more questions in the chat. I think we'll answer that if everybody has enough time, and then we'll wrap it up at that point. The next question is in regards to the funding, Paul, that the ramp up of funding that IM3NY received, and how involved government agencies or green policy, how that has taken an impact on the funding. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, certainly. We'll be making an announcement next week, which I encourage everyone to look for, that will help describe some of the funding that we've received to date to support what we're doing. And I can't go into that any further than that at this instant, but I think you'll find that very interesting. We have gotten a widespread swath of support from both private equity and from other entities in the marketplace to support us. If you've been around this business, kind of like startups going into larger operations, one of the things that is the hardest thing in the world to do is to get those first investors to come in. Everybody, it's a race to be second. You know, nobody wants to take the high degree of risk on the first round. The second round is much easier because you've got somebody in there who believes in it. They've done the due diligence. They've done a lot of things to uncover the market barriers and opportunities. They've made an assessment that what you've got is going to work, and they've provided that support. With that, once we start into a further line of production and providing samples, a lot of the people that we've talked to along the way have indicated that they're very interested in being second. That goes without saying. It's just the nature of investment stuff in this category. But that doesn't preclude us from looking for every avenue possible in order to support this. Certainly, government funding is very lucrative. Certainly, funding from major partners is very lucrative, and many other sources. So we have not, sort of tied down exactly how we will proceed. We're acutely aware that there are many options. We've been focused on getting the first monies in place in order to support the first gigawatt. But in that process, we've identified a tremendous amount of opportunity. And we have a lot of people who have put their hands up and said, what about me? And how do I begin to play in this as you move forward? So yes, we're treating it as a broad swath, a matrix, and looking at every opportunity to continue to build this out.
So the final question is, what is the view on how IM3 will scale to 32 gigawatt hours? And I think they mean in terms of partnerships with customers. That base.
Again, it's a good question. I think I touched on that just a little bit earlier when I said that some of the partners that we're talking to are acutely aware of the fact that there is scarcity of cells available in the world. And as you go forward, it takes time to build plants. They don't happen overnight. It takes time to build technology within those plants. It doesn't happen overnight. As part of the reason why the roadmap of where you're going is so important. We can demonstrate the capability to be able to manufacture in a world-class way, but it's taking that and turning it into these contracts, these partnerships, these volume commitments by large customers. You've seen Northvolt do it. You've seen others do it. I'm not exactly sure that those are right. You know, the devil's in the details. I see a lot of things get announced. What I don't see is the details of what's been announced. And the headlines always look great. I've been there before inside the battery industry. But you know, if you've got hurdles to make and you've got milestones to achieve in some of these contracts, it can be a little bit more of a challenge than might meet the eye in the headlines as they're proceeded. We are going to proceed with as much vigor and as much data and as much relevance in terms of capital to support our build out to 32 with real contracts and real relationships with customers who are, you know, sort of deeply wed with us, who want us to be successful towards our technology roadmap and who want to achieve the benefits of what we're able to talk about as we move forward. So it's a relationship, yes. Many of them will come across with contracts and commitments to you. I only caution that as you see those, you have to have a clear eye to the details. We have a clear eye to the details. We have those conversations started. Contracts in hand make financing easier. The discussion with various sources of capital become a lot easier. But we have to weave it. And you know, if you have the product, the customers will make commitments. If you have the process, customers will make commitments. And it's a matter of performance, it's a matter of cost, and it's a matter of timing. Blending all that together to take it to the customer and get those partnerships and those relationships started is the key to it all.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you to all the panelists, Bill, Paul, Matt, you guys did a great job, very informative, great information to share. Speaking of sharing, this is being recorded and it's going to be posted on the chambers as well as the agency's website. So we encourage everybody that participated and is on here to download it, share the links so that everybody in our community can get this information and be educated on the benefits of the battery industry going forward. Thank you for all who attended as well. Hopefully this was really good information, answered some good questions. And we are planning our next program in the series coming on Friday, June 4th at 8:30, same time. So more information to come on this. Registration will be posted soon. We hope to have a great panel on that as well as that's starting to shape out. Look forward to seeing everybody then, and thank you again. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a great weekend.
All right. Bye-bye.